Today we are about to have our last talk of the day, which is hosted by Tega Okiti, who's our Artex curator, and it will be a conversation with Mati Diop, a French Senegalese director, extremely brilliant, and we're honored and happy to have her among us with us. We just had a screening of her latest movie called Dahomey, and they're going to be in conversation talking about it. So please give them a round of applause, and we're very happy to have them.
Good evening, everyone. As Hailey said, if you are sitting in the back, do come forward and join us. We really want to hear what you have to say about the film, and we want this to be a really open, collective conversation. So yeah, please, I do encourage you to come forward. Mati, hello.
Hello, Tega.
Good evening.
Good evening. Before we begin our conversation, I just wanted to say thank you for being here. I'm extremely happy to be showing my films in Lagos. It's a moment, a rendezvous I've been waiting for since a long time. The promotion tour of Dahomey is behind me. I stopped promoting with the film since 6 months, but I made an exception for Lagos because I really wanted to see how the films and you, the audience, would enter in conversation. And so this screening was very special to me, so thank you very much for being here.
Well, we're happy to have you. So I want to start just with a kind of simple, more opening question. So for people who aren't familiar with your work, just can you share some insights into the origin of your practice, how you arrived at filmmaking? And I was thinking that a potentially useful place would be to start would be around your first short film, your first medium short film that really brought you to prominence, A Thousand Suns. And yeah, which is a short film that explores the legacy of Tukibuki, which was made by your uncle and seminal African filmmaker, Jibril Mabeti. So yeah, do you want to maybe give us a bit of an insight? Start from there?
Yes, because you mentioned yourself this film I made in 2013 called 1000 Suns, which is indeed a film I dedicated to the legacy of the personal and collective legacy of Tukibuki, directed by my uncle Jibril Mabeti in 1972 in Dakar. I guess before that film, I made a first short film in Paris that I auto-produced. I gathered friends and we shot it. So I was 24 years old. But then I met the great director Claire Denis, a French director. I think she's, to me, the best director alive in France. I was very lucky to act in her film, but I was already a filmmaker. And right after this, I really felt the need to re-explore the legacy of my uncle's work. It's been 10 years that he passed away. And he represented for me kind of a golden age of African cinema, of Senegalese cinema. And I could sense at that time that there was kind of a erasement of African stories, of African faces, of African language in the cinema. It was disappearing off the screen. And so I lived with that very brilliant myth of Tukibuki, of Mabeti, of Samben, that was very present in my mind because it's also part of my family, in contrast with the absence of African stories in cinema. And I think I had a very clear and profound awareness that I was the generation that had to build the bridge between the generation of my uncle and today, and that I had the possibility as a French Senegalese filmmaker to engage my cinema in Senegal in around 2008, at a time where Africa was not hype at all. People found me a bit from Paris. I was a bit lonely in that dynamic of going to Dakar and make films, because it was really a moment where Africa was out.
I think from a European, like in Europe, I can relate
I talk
to
from
that.
my perspective, and it was really disturbing for me, that reality. Because once again, since the golden age, except Abderrahmane Sissako and closer to my generation, Alain Gomis, there was really a dynamic to reimpulse. And I'm part of a generation that I think that it was our mission in a way to continue that dynamic. And so the first film I wanted to dedicate was about Tukibuki, not to give a homage, because it would not, I think it's not enough as a motif for a film, but to engage a conversation between the generation of the 70s and mine, about many things, about politics, about their legacy, what they were able to transmit, what they did not transmit, and the runes on which we had to rebuild and to reinvent also our own gaze. And so yes, and from 1000 Sun, I also directed Atlantics, the short film about which is portraying a certain period of Senegal where a lot of young people were migrating from Senegal to Europe. And at that time too, it was mostly portrayed, taken in charge by Western medias, and I think that cinema really needed to bring another existential dimension, and mostly create a space where the African people problematics that were being taken in charge by the Western media, to create a space where these same people could talk from their own place with their own words about their own reality. So that was the most I guess the gesture was mostly about this, and then Atlantics, and then Dahomey.
Well, it's so exciting, and I remember the first time I actually saw Alain Gomez's film Tega, and started to really think about, or started to see or experience this new generation. And I think what you're saying, it's interesting what you're saying, because it was, like you said, it's not homage, it's like you're creating your own language, you know, and as a way of your own kind of engagement or giving voice. So on that kind of note, can you talk a little bit about Dahomey, so the film that we had just screened, and how that film kind of came about, and why that specific kind of topic?
So yeah, it all started in 2021 when so yeah, it's already 4 years ago. I had already the idea of writing a fiction. I wanted to, after Atlantics, I've been wanted to write a fiction, not about restitution, but about the story of an African mask from the day of its capture until the day of its repatriation. And I really wanted to invent a character which was going to be an African mask, talking to us about its journey from being captured until being repatriated. So that was my fiction idea. I thought it was, and it came out because for the first time, in France at least, when bones, the body of Saji Bartman from South Africa were repatriated in her country, there was a very heavy silence in France around this, because I think that nobody dealt with all the trauma and the heaviness of guilt and responsibility of such a story. And I remind very well the silence surrounding the day of her repatriation. It was a very heavy silence. And so when Emmanuel Macron suddenly, out of the blue, said in a discourse that artifacts should be given back to Africa, all of them like this, it sounded a bit hors sol, I don't know how to say, a bit abstract, out of nowhere. And I was obviously aware of the communication strategy around it, but still, I felt something was shifting in the air, and I felt that we needed artists like me, Afro-descendant, to reappropriate that subject before it's, too instrumentalized by politics. And it's when I started to think about this fiction I told you about, the African Mask. And then, before I had the time to write that fiction about that African Mask, talking about its experience, I read on the news that 26 treasures stolen during colonization, rooted during colonization at the time of the Dahomey kingdom, were going to be repatriated by France to Benin, the Republic of Benin, which was going to happen 2 weeks after the moment I read in the press. I had, as a filmmaker, as an Afro-descendant filmmaker, also as the director of Atlantics, which already deals with this, with the figure of the revenants, the figure of the migrants as a revenant, that a film should be absolutely made on this specific restitution. And the urgency of archiving ourselves, our own history material for now and for the future, was extremely vibrant in me, because once again I sensed that if that restitution was not only covered by the media but really anchored in cinema and through a subjective gaze, and that it was also the possibility to once again create a space for African youth to impose itself in the debate of the restitution. So I was very lucky to, as a filmmaker, feel that I had all the tools to impose myself as an artist, as a French African artist, to impose myself in the debate, and mostly to impose what a certain African Beninese youth was thinking of this, and to give this youth the first role, in that moment, and I also really wanted to hear the artifacts that came from the idea of this fiction. So the shooting began like a documentary, because it was we were dealing with real situations, going to the museum, filming the artifacts being put in the cases, and so it was a documentary situation, but I put all the fiction elements inside that documentary. I wanted to, that was important for me to experiment.
Even with, I think, all of that kind of understanding, 2 weeks is a very short amount of time. So I'm just really curious about how, I suppose, like, for me, especially for like filmmakers in the audience, like with the work that you've done, up to that point, it's intentional, right? You were gestating and developing this story about the mask, and Atlantique went from a short to a feature. So for you as an artist and a maker, like, can you talk a little bit more about like what happened in that 2 weeks? So
in that 2 weeks, we had to find money to make the film, first of all. And I had to make sure that I was my statement, my point of view was solid, because it's to me at least it felt like a big responsibility to make not the film about this restitution, but there was not going to be 3-4 films by filmmakers about that film. I was aware that it might become the film about this restitution, which is historical. I mean, historical is definitely a concept to question, and the film, I also made the film because I wanted to question how historical it was. Was it historical just because Talon, the government of Talon, asked for artifacts? Macron finally decided it was a good time to give it back. And is it only historical because this is happening between two countries, or what more makes it historical? To me, it was a question to be addressed to the Benin youth. But to answer your question, in 2 weeks, I had to figure out how to find the money, how to make a consistent film that was going to be way more in terms of debate, to open a field of a complex field of questions, and that was going to be a film that goes way beyond because once you've said artifacts have to be restituted, well, okay, then what else, you know? And I felt that there was so many layers to take in charge, because the subject is both very binary, and I think it had stayed a bit too binary in the global debate, and I really wanted to bring as much angles and dimensions, political dimension, social dimension, spiritual dimension, and mostly I really wanted the film to raise the debate of restitution on a much more grounded social level and on a higher spiritual level. So it has both to be rooted in much more social questions that I really wanted to bring up to these students, and the spiritual dimension of what these artifacts represent for us, for the people that are able to welcome it again, and also the lost signification of these artifacts, what they represented spiritually for the people from whom it was stolen. I really wanted to put in tension all these layers. So while we searched for money, I wrote all the angles that seemed important to me, which were the point of view of the artifacts, the voice of the artifacts, and the point of view of the youth. And also we needed the complicity of the government to begin the film, because we needed the authorization of the government to be able to film everying. I mean, everything French I was interested by. French and we needed money to begin the film. Yeah. And it's a bit tricky to be so frontally in touch with the government about making a film, because you want to make sure the film stays independent, and you want to make sure the film doesn't become the film of the governments, obviously. So we were, thanks to the sensibility of some people inside the Ministry of Culture of Benin. I'm thinking about José Plia, who unfortunately passed away since, who was a key person who really made the bridge between the artistic urgency I was in and the political delicate situation. So he was really able to to facilitate the dialogue in between an artist like me and the government of Benin. I created my own production company in Senegal because I needed the film to be held by both French and African production company, because I also wanted the film to be produced by. I was hoping that both France and Benin and Senegal would put a balanced amount of money on the table, because I found that to make a film on restitution with France putting 80% of the budget and African putting only, I really wanted to find a way that the production was aligned on the statement of the film. So in 2 weeks there was a lot of things to take in consideration.
Well, hats off to you.
But because it was already a fiction in my head, the line of having the artifact speak was already very rooted. So I was very sure of the writing. Yeah.
Well, I can see definitely how that kind of aligns with what you've done in Dahomey with this artifact that has its own subjectivity. But I think there is a way that you play with fiction and reality across your films in really interesting ways. More generally, if you look at like Atlantiques, where it's like that's a very realist film, but then you have this sort of fantasy element and you have these elements of haunting. So can you maybe talk a little bit about how that approach kind of exists in your world building more generally?
Maybe I will continue to talk about, to answer your question, but through Dahomey, because you all come from that screening. But for Dahomey, like I just said, it was really what was making the challenge, but also for me as a filmmaker, the pleasure of the writing and the challenges of the mise en scène is that the restitution in itself was putting me at a carrefour, at a crossroads, thank you, of political, trivial, economical, social, spiritual layers, and I never begin any project putting my own sensibility as an artist, like, oh, I'm going to make a fantasy film about restitution. It's always very rooted in the comment dire? It's never, the fantasy dimension is never imposed on the reality. It's not an artist fantasy, justement. It's in the film, the supernatural dimension comes from the immateriality and invisible dimension of the artifacts themselves, coming from Africa and having a dimension that is rooted in.
Like a metaphysical.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. A metaphysical dimension, which is not something that comes from the outside that I would put on the film like fantasy genre. It's rooted in African
what it is,
culture.
What it is. Yeah.
So for me, it's not a fantasy film. It's the reason why the statues stuck in the film are not the exploration of a genre, a fantasy genre, is to give these treasures, these artifacts, to give them back a voice, a story. So for me, to have the artifact speak is not a fantasy. It's not a fantasy preciousness. It's something that makes sense according to African spirituality, and mostly about what restitution means to me, which is give back a voice, give back life to these objects and turn them as subjects opposed to objects that colonial ethnography has reduced them to. So this is why I'm saying that it's never. Then, of course, I'm very attracted to fantastic cinema, but that comes second. It's not the first motor for me, you know.
Yeah, so things are a bit more like situational in that way. There's a really great moment actually in Dahomey where that kind of, I think, articulates what you're saying, where I think she's Haitian. There's a woman and she gives the interview and she talks about this moment for her and her deciding to return as this sort of manifestation of a collective will of these objects, but then also this broader complexity where it is kind of, it's multi-directional. So the objects coming back are doing something, and then there's this sort of outward kind of movement as well. Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit, go back to what you were saying earlier about young people and the centrality of young people in Dahomey. And can you talk a little bit about the second kind of movement in the film and that debate with young people and how that was constructed, how that came about?
So I was, like I was saying, the first urgencies for me when I decided to make the film is to create a space where a certain Beninese youth could take part of the debate, because once again I felt that what was missing mostly around reflection about restitution was African voices, but from the people. I'm not talking about some intellectuals or some experts, but the voices of the people was really missing, especially of the young people. And so when I arrived in Benin with the artifacts, I was wondering if the repatriation of these artifacts was going to be of interest for the population, because I was not supposing it would be. I didn't know if it's something that was meaningful for them, or if they had other things in their mind to think of. And so we went to the university because I wanted to see with my own eyes if a debate was organized by young people at the university, if at the radio it was really taking a lot of space. And I realized that, of course, it was covered by the local media, but that at the university that day nothing specific happened. So it was a first observation that a certain category of young people were not so involved in that story, and so before it took me, the film was made during 2 years between writing sessions, shooting sessions, editing sessions, and so before I organized myself with my team this debate, I did a lot of back and forth between Benin and France, and I met a lot of young people, recorded them, had a lot of discussions with them about what this restitution was representing for them. And obviously, they had each one had a very different point of view, obviously, which was important for me to restitute, because when we think about African youth, we would project so many cliches, and we think about African youth as a block, and it's very important for me, if I stage a debate, is really to restitute the complexity of all the different angles that can exist within a same city, within a same country, depending on also the social backgrounds, the ethnical backgrounds. But I had to focus on the university. I felt that I had to find to concentrate myself on a social group. Because I also could have asked people in the streets what they were thinking, but I thought it was a bit demagogic, because obviously most of people have other things to think about. and that was the main my main question before making that film is do really people have the luxury to care about that restitution? So after spending a lot of time on the university, meeting the young people that had something to say, that could emancipate themselves from the censorship situation in Benin, because it's very brave for these young people to be speaking out in this film, because these young people are not at all encouraged to speak out in Benin. So for them it was really a responsibility to make that film and to say what they had to say. And we talked about it before the shooting, because I need to make sure voilà, it's a delicate situation for them. And so I gathered 10 different students from different disciplines: Historia Economic, History of Art, Philosophy, and we worked on I worked on a 3-page document to really make sure all the questions, to bring up complex questions, and then even if it's very staged, the moment we shoot is theirs. It's their words, their thoughts, their space, their moments, and the debate and the cinema appeared to me like a tool, a medium that was able to make this debate exist. And I think all the elements were there in, comment dire, were latent, that there was a strong potential for this debate to exist, but this film became the frame where, the debate could really happen, and then, voilà, that's the incredible power of cinema. Is not only it happens for them, but it circulates in the whole world. So I think it has quite a strong political tool.
No, I think there is a really incredible range of opinions from the young people, which is, for me, was just like very arresting. And as you say, I think young people across the board, but I think in Africa generally, are just so radically underestimated at certain points. So I think it also, for me, it gave a level of sort of like uplift to a debate that can seem quite heavy and quite academic. So there is
quite elitist,
yeah. So that, I think, is something that's really
and binary.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask one more question before I open it up to the audience, and it is on the note of kind of restitution. And you mentioned a lot of stakeholders being involved in facilitating your making of the film, but also in the process of restituting objects. And I think a key argument is that has been made is that artists are really important figures in that process, to, I guess, sort of like reanimate and do the work of repair that I think you've tried to do with this film, and that's the invitation it makes. So I'm just wondering, for you personally, as an artist who has had an engagement with these objects, like, how do you feel that has it developed you in some way or enhanced your practice or your storytelling?
I felt, as a filmmaker, extremely privileged to be able to, to meet my times, to be in possession of a tool, the medium of cinema, who felt so accurate for me to be able to grasp the incredible complexity and vastness of such a topic. And I mostly felt incredibly, lucky to as a filmmaker after Atlantics to have to be at a moment also of my career where I could really choose to make that film in the conditions that were mine. And I never felt as much aligned as an artist with my political times. I've never felt as aligned with the faith I have in the political tool that cinema is, to first be able to use cinema as an act of restitution and reparation in itself, and to be able, through the act of showing the film all over the world, to raise the awareness about the restitution, mostly from the African perspective, really gave me an immense sense of what making films could mean today politically, and how much cinema can be used in an extremely political, can have a very subtle political impact. I've really shown the film first in Senegal, then Benin, then France, then in the US, and each screening was extremely resonating very differently depending on the political, social situation. And it really felt like each conversation after the film was opening the imaginary that surrounds restitution, and was really uplifting and revitalizing the debate once again from this university debate. So it was, I felt as an artist, yes, extremely enriched, and I could really feel the power of the medium I chose. I began in the fields of arts, more contemporary art, which I left very soon because it was addressing itself to such a small elite of people, and I figured out very very early that it was not going to become my battlefield, and so Dahomey made me reaffirm why I chose this medium and how much I trust it in terms of once again, political tool.
Thank you. So we'd really love to hear from the audience. So I think hopefully there is a mic somewhere. So if anyone has any questions. Oh God, we've got loads of questions. Oh gosh. Okay, I will start with the lady in the front.
Hi. Hi Mati, hi Tega. Thank you for coming, or thank you for showing the film. So my question is about the soundscape of Dahomey. I'm very curious about how you constructed it. I think that your use of absence, like silence, specific sounds that you decided to heighten and specific ones that you chose not to show, not just the sound of the artifact when they were speaking to us, but also the rattling of the chains. I'm curious about what that meant to you and how you approached it in the film.
Thank you very much for your great question. I was wondering if you could hear her question. Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you for your question, because obviously sound is very, it's almost the dimension that came first to me as a director, because I come from a more musical background. Not only because my father is a musician and composed the scores of the films of his brother Djibril Diabambeti, but because the first thing I wanted to express myself through was music, but then I ended up choosing cinema. So I think that I have a very musical way to approach writing, to approach directing, to approach editing. And the choice I make, not only about the music, but also about the sound writing is very specific. And you mentioned silence in the beginning of your comment, and Yeah, I almost started with the idea of making a silent film, at least for the first part, because before having the idea of having the statues speak, I mostly wanted to have them silence, because how can I say, I think I wanted to charge them with mystery, opacity, and I wanted their power, magnetism. I talk about the statues, I talk about the artifacts. I really wanted their power, frequency, magnetism, not to be able to be reduced by anybody, you know? I really want their opacity to become their own, to become their power. I don't know if it makes sense. Because to me, the idea was to film these artifacts as revenants from a very, very, very long story of oblivion, of
Objectification?
Thank you. And so it felt to me that, yeah, they shouldn't even speak, they should just feel strong in their silence and in their solitude too. But then obviously there were so many things I could express through them. Their rapture, their exile in this museum, all we hear in the undergrounds of the museum. I also wanted the return of the artifacts from France to Benin to remind them of the first deportation from Dahomey to Europe. And I also wanted to create echoes between the deportation of these artifacts and the deportation of men reduced to slave. So there was a lot of history material to be expressed through them. And so obviously I decided to make them speak. I really wanted I didn't write I know I'm kind of doing this with your question, but I'll come back to the sound. I wanted an Haitian writer to take in charge the lyrics, because I wanted, you know, somebody with this specific story to take charge the words. But so silence was still a very important reality to make exist in the film, because the first story I have with restitution is a story of silence. As in France, for me, until a very long time, this topic was a bit en sommeil. My relationship with restitution topic was a bit merde, I have a English issue. Anyway, I think the film, the silence in the film wants to put in form the denial, the silence denial that has surrounded restitution and all these colonial problematics. At least from a French perspective, I think silence would be the first consequence of such a heavy legacy. And I think the silence in the film has a lot to do with this. I was talking about the silence that surrounded the repatriation of Saji Bartman, and this silence has a weight, and I really wanted this silence to be felt in the film. And that the voices of this student would break that silence. So it's really, I really write my films almost like a partition, like a quite silent first part, broke by voices of Gezo, but the voices of Gezo is the voices of the ancestors, also the voices of us, Afro-descendants, who are more and more returning in many ways to our homeland or the homeland of our parents. Gezo, I identified as an Afro-descendant myself a lot to these artifacts. And it's exactly what this Asian woman was talking about. The parallel between this restitution and this, what we experiencing, this our own return to our mutual African roots. So the voices are holding all these layers. And I really wanted the second part with the debate to sound like a scream, like a liberation chorus, breaking the silence. And also the way I chose the students was almost like different instruments playing that I reunite to play almost like a partition with very different voices, textures, very different opinion, putting together, creating still an harmonious chorus. And I really, at some point, was picturing the film as, the chorus of the artifacts, the ancestors, meeting the chorus of the youth, and finding a point of tension between these two temporality. And then music, which doesn't come first, because I think before talking about music in a film, there's so many sound layers and dimensions you can talk about. But the choice of Wally Badarou and Dean Blunt was also very precise. Wally Badarou is French, is French Beninese. He's a very, very important, well-known, quite underground too, because he was more behind the machines. He's a composer, but a arrangements producer. He's major in music, but very underground. And the music of his I used in the film are from an album he wrote for an imaginary film. And it was very exciting to be using tracks he has composed for a future film. And I really feel, it's very palpable in his in the tracks I used in Dahomey. To me, they were already really have this texture of utopia and very futuristic. Dean Blunt is another musician of my generation from UK, originally from Nigeria. He's never been here, and his music is really an incredible syncretism of industrial UK music combining African influences, but in a very ghost way, because he never came, and his music is really such a perfect combination of the syncretism I embody as a filmmaker. So it's not only putting beautiful music, it's really make sure you choose musician that's musician dont la musique to make sure that the track I use and the musician I choose, they hold this story. I mean, their story as Afro-descendants are palpable in their tracks. It's not only about beauty, it's about all the layers, all the very complex cultural, spiritual, political layers within Wally Badarou and Dean Blunt's tracks are also expressing in the whole picture, even in the story restitution. So, but it's also connected to pure pleasure. I love the tracks, and it's not only. I think they almost sound like they were made for the film, which is not the case. Voilà, sorry, I could talk for sound very long.
I think
I'm being too long, I'm sorry.
I think we've got some questions in the middle, so in the second row, and then we'll go to the row behind after. Oh, I see you as well. I see you.
Hi Tega, hi Mati. Good evening, everyone. I really liked when you spoke about how you wanted the funding for your film to be balanced from like France and Senegal, because I feel like if it's like you said, if it's lopsided, it kind of affects the narrative and or like it affects how the control of the film and everything. And as African artists, I feel like we already have to perform so much to be like seen or to make it outside and everything. So in speaking about performance, I had a question about your film In My Room. Yeah, and
I would answer with pleasure, but
yeah, really,
maybe nobody has seen it here,
Oh.
so.
Could you maybe give a little synopsis with no spoilers? And
Yeah, in my
maybe
room. In my room, it's a film that was commissioned to me during lockdown by a brand called Miu Miu, who gives who founds only woman filmmaker once a year. So they make a film using the Miu Miu clothes. And voilà. And when they proposed this to me, it was lockdown, so I didn't care less about using their clothes in a film, because it was a very, very challenging moment for all of us. And so I accepted, if they accepted, that the clothes would not be the subject. And so I was already making a film on my grandmother when they asked me to do it, my past grandmother. And so the film is made in my room during lockdown, listening to vocals of my grandmother, who was in her way confined because she was quite lonely in her apartment in Paris. But voilà.
No, my question was, going from being a performer to a director, and also like In My Room, using very small space and very small resources, coming back to the question of like resources and funding and everything. How do you think that kind of like affects creativity, and like how do you think it fosters, like especially for artists, how do you think experimental film or like working with not having so many resources can affect creativity and even in a roundabout way kind of like foster it?
Okay, in case somebody has a last question on Dahomey, I'm going to answer very fast so we can finish maybe the conversation on Dahomey. But I just felt having the opportunity to make that film during confinement, which was a big privilege, and after having directed Atlantics, which was my biggest film in terms of budgets and my first feature film, it was I really wanted to go back to a place of making that was extremely light, one camera, very, very minimal sound equipment, and to re-experience how far, how strong you can still make film with nothing. As I made my first short film with a DV camera, a mic, and friends acting for free, I think it's super important. To me, it was important, even after having made a first feature, to come back to the core of how I started cinema, which is with very, very few technical means. It's really a question of staying the more independent I can in terms of creativity, and make sure that I still can make strong cinema with nothing. When I say nothing, I meant that I was filming with my little camera. But I really like to go back and forth, feature film and very small project to stay connected to the process as much as I can, less than to building a career, which doesn't mean it's not important, but to stay connected to the very first source of my creativity.
Okay, I think there was a question behind. Just
the last one, but please on Dahomey, so everybody can. Yes.
Okay, so I think we'll go the front row there, and then we'll come across to this side.
Two.
Yeah, hi. Very quickly, Mati,
Oh, with pleasure.
you mentioned, talking about Dahomey, when you were making Dahomey, you were worried about the film, you wanted to quickly make it, I think I heard right, before it gets instrumentalized. Did you mean the restitution gets instrumentalized or the conversation around the restitution?
I thought it was extremely important for me as an artist, for the youth we hear in the film, to take part of the debates, to be as loud as we could, and we were. The film did great, got a lot of attention, and it was a way to put the projector on them, not on me as an artist, but on the power artists should have inside the debate, at least on this topic, and not to let the governments take the whole space of the debate and reduce the question of restitution to a diplomatic, political level, but to make sure this film would bring the social dimension, the spiritual dimension. Et voilà. So, and the students talk about it in the film too, because there was a very big communication, a very big communication work from the Beninese government about their heroic project to get these artifacts back. But once all the energy is put on the communication of having the artifacts back, what is done for the people to get in real contact with the artifacts, what is done for the scholars, the students, the population to reconnect through these artifacts with their story, which spaces are created for that. And mostly it was obviously a pretext to ask about the legacy of colonialism dans l'enseignement, at school, to talk about the French language in Benin, which is majoritaire, which is omniscient. And so restitution for me was mostly also kind of a way, a pretext to put on the table so many questions about the stigmas of colonization. I think restitution is almost a spectrum, the perfect spectrum to bring on the table all the other subjects that are completely connected to each other. And the common denominator is the legacy of colonialism, but through the spectrum of restitution, a lot could be said at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're going to take the last one in the front.
Thank you. So, do you want to? Oh no, go ahead.
Hi. Hi, Mati. Hi, Tega. My name is Ade Oshin, first AD on Becoming a Guinea Fowl, as well as My Father's Shadow. So my question for you is...
Congratulations on the film.
Two great films.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So my question for you as a filmmaker and as a first AD is, I could see in your films there's a interesting connection between social issues, political issues, and bringing spirituality into social and political matters, and also bringing the next generation, the youth, into this space. So it's kind of like you're transferring power from the ancestors to the young ones to carry it on. Now, my question coming to Dahomey about, how it's getting so much impact. You're in Nigeria talking about it right now, and how you literally got it done in, shooting for 2 weeks, if I heard right.
No. Not
the artifacts.
The shooting the film took me 2 years to be made.
Yes.
But
like the preparation.
The preparation of everything was very fast. Yeah,
exactly.
2 weeks.
So in that process, as a first AD, I can feel how much tension and dealing with politics, having to wear like a producer's cap, having to wear like a creative director's cap, and how were you able to keep the creative focus up to the point where the film is this successful? like on set?
I think I was ready. This is why I talked about being so grateful about arriving at a point where after the short films I made after Atlantics, this specific restitution arrived at a time when I was ready to handle all these topics and dimension you talk about, because I guess I was trained through the other films by having myself very rooted into documentary filmmaking, which is the best school, because in I don't make documentaries, I make cinema, but in some of my film, the conditions of making were documentary, which means that it's a back and forth, systematic back and forth between the deepest and most complex everyday realities, having to match what are the narrative you have in mind. So it's an ongoing conversation with reality, and that's the best training as a filmmaker, because it's really to stay in dialogue with very rooted issues. I think I was also at a point of my path where people trust me enough also to carry that project. Because I came to the government saying I want to make the film on that restitution, and I was lucky that they knew my work, that they knew who they were giving this mission to, even though it was not their film but mine, and that I had to make sure it was not their film but my independent film. And so I think it was an incredible, comment on dit, serendipity in terms of a rendezvous between a historical moment and a filmmaker. And with no pretension, I felt as a filmmaker that film was with me, and that I had the legitimacy to do it, because the questions of restitution, I think, are at the core of my work since I began to make films in Senegal. When I did my first short film in Dakar in 2008, which focused on one single young man who tells with his own words and his own flesh about his experience of migrating in a boat from Senegal to Europe. He was telling this story to his two best friends, filming by me. For me, it was already about repeating the experience of migration through his mouth, through his experience, through his sensibility, through his grief, through his strength, and to make sure that the experience of migration was restituted by him to the world. So restitution is, I think, the key, the core of my work since I began. So, well, merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tega.
So we're out of time.
And thanks to all of you for this
yes, thank you
conversation.
for joining us. Thank you for your really insightful questions. And I love leaving on that note of readiness and being able to meet our destinies. And I just want to say thank you for your generosity with your answers, with your time, and also just for being here and being with us. So we're very, very grateful
it's
to you.
an honor. And I want to come back and for
God,
more
thank
discussion.
you.
And
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Actually,
Thank you.
I had one more question. We're actually at the eve of the opening of MOA, which is the Museum of West Africa.
Yes, we are.
We are in Nigeria. You just screened Dahomey talking about restitution. And the theme of this year is imagining otherwise. Could you please tell us how would you imagine otherwise museum talking about, opening a new museum, and how would you see a new museum or a new decade of museum, if I make sense?
I I don't know if it's a question for me, but as a filmmaker and as myself, when I heard about this MOA project, it's really, I don't know exactly, I don't think I'm aware of all the challenges they're facing. I think it's extremely complicated, but at least to know that this team in Benin City is have the very strong intention to build a museum that is able to welcome the stolen artifacts and to recreate a strong social dynamic between the people of Benin City and the looted artifact is, to me, sounds like future. And future finally emerging. So it's extremely inspiring to me as a singular individual Afro-descendant person, and also very, very inspiring for me as a writer, to start witness things that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, because we don't, I think, realize, I think we take a bit for granted a lot of things that are happening, are finally happening now. I think that if somebody had told me 6 years ago that a museum was built in Benin City to welcome the stolen artifact, it would have sounded to me like utopia, and it's now happening. So voilà, I think it's major, and yeah, voilà. So I'm very grateful to be witnessing this and to contribute to this story. Voilà.
That's why you have to come back next year.
Voilà. Merci.
Thank you everyone. Good evening.